Howdy y'all, Fuzzy Biker out here having a good old time on my 1976 Harley Davidson Sportster, the Bear. Check that hot rod out. It's one of my all-time favorite motorcycles. A friend of mine in high school owned it. Bought it new, I believe, or close to new, and he passed on a few years ago, and I was able to pick it up from his widow. And we did a lot of work to it, got it running. Just a beautiful machine. I don't keep it quite as clean as Barry would have, but she's gorgeous nonetheless. Check that hot rod out. Location today is the site of the first train robbery in the West committed by the notorious Jesse James and his gang of outlaws. July 21st, 1873. The funny thing is it didn't happen here. Those are the tracks, they say, the actual tracks. He hadn't bolted the tracks and the train fell over, but it actually happened over that hill. You can see a track where people walk up there, just over the hill over yonder. Anyhow, back to the bike. Barry owned this bike for well, forever. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I was thinking about rebuilding an old Sportster, and I said to my buddy, if I could find Barry's old Sportster, that's the one I'd want to rebuild. Because Barry and I used to ride together. I used to race this motorcycle with my motorcycles, and you know, there's a lot of connection there. And he said, well, I've never met Barry's widow, and he said, I've got Barry's widow's phone number right here. So I called her up, and after a little bit of talking, she gave me the bike. And, you know, we put a little bit of money into it to get it running, and there she is. It's a beautiful thing. You know, it's the iron. It's an iron head. They call this an iron head Sportster. That means the head, where the valves are, is actually made of iron. So are the cylinders. So this is all iron, of course, air cooled, of course. I think it's about 8 or 8.5 to 1 compression. The cam shaft is down here. Actually, there's 4 cams in here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And each one of those runs a push rod that pushes a valve. It's the old mechanical system. It actually works very well. It's very dependable. It's mechanical. Everything's just mechanical. This is the generator right here, the starter right here. This has a, the original bike had a Keenan carburetor, but we had all kinds of trouble with that. And I tried a couple other brands and just had no luck. So I bought this as a temporary carburetor. It's a Mikuni, cost about $100. And I've had it on there ever since because it just works so well. I've had no troubles with that. Just a gorgeous bike. Barry put these oil lines on here himself, these braided ones. Those would have been tubes in the old days. When I rebuilt the bike originally had a electronic ignition on it from back in the day, back in the 70s. It was old and hard and it didn't work right, and we knew it'd be trouble, so I put the bike back to points. And what I found with the point system, the old point system is what you use before electronic ignition. What we found is I didn't ride the bike enough for that system to stay, it had trouble. So I went ahead and put an electronic ignition back in it, had to put a new coil in it, and anyway, it works great. This is a tachometer drive that actually runs off one of the cams. Runs up to the back of the camshaft, all mechanical, of course. No Kickstarter on this. This is a dry sump engine, which means the oil that collects in the bottom is pumped up to this tank right here and then fed back into an oil pump. So there's 2 oil pumps, one that pressurizes the engine and the scavenge pump, which pumps it back into the tank here. One of the features of this engine that everybody talks about when you talk about these old bikes is how big the old battery is. And when we got the bike, only a couple things were missing. One of them was this battery case, so that's all new. And the other thing is the original motorcycle pipes, the Harley Davidson ones, Barry had replaced them with these drag pipes, they call them. Now, he had those on when we were kids, so I thought that was a good thing to leave. I have found 2 sets that were original. I decided not to change it back. And also, this is not original anymore. I still have the original carburetor, and I still have the original oval air cleaner, but this is the rig we're using right now because it's more drivable. Back to this side of the bike. As far as electronics go, this was a cusp year for Harley Davidson. You could have this solid state regulator. Some of the bikes had this. Some of them had the old style mechanical one. I like the mechanical ones. I'm old enough to have used them and worked on them, but I'll be honest, I'm glad it has this type. And we actually did replace this. I could have replaced it with the old style, but I thought since the bike had this on originally, I'm going to go ahead and use that the original one. This is actually an oil cooler off of a power steering pump. And the Harley guys would take those and have them chromed like that, and then put them on their bikes as an oil cooler. We did replace the whole clutch underneath here. This is the primary cover, they call it. So the engine, big chain here, wraps around what they call a clutch basket. And we did put a whole new clutch in there. Clutch cable right there. Look at the shift lever right here. This is 1976. I think it was 1975 was the first year you had to have the shifter on the left side of the motorcycle. had always been on the right. And so they rigged it, and by 1977 they had changed it, but they rigged it so it would work. So this is considered a weaker system. I've had no trouble with it. I did take this cover off, and there was a million years of dirt in there, but that was kind of kind of funny. This oil that you see here is from what they call a chain oiler, and it's stock to the bike, and it just kind of gives a mist of oil that constantly keeps the oil on the chain. So you never have to oil the chain, but you have to clean it off. What else can I tell you about this hot rod engine? This is the generator. We replaced that with, I can't think of the brand, but I had gone through two. I burned up two. The one that came with it was bad. The second one we got worked for a while and went bad. And I can't remember the name, the brand, but they were quite expensive, but they work very well. Jumping over to the front end and suspension, what you should notice right away, the wheels are aluminum. Now, not all of these bikes have the aluminum wheels. A good buddy of mine has the same motorcycle, same year, but he's got steel wheels. And he has the rusting problem that these bikes are notorious for with their wheels. The aluminum wheels are lighter. This is aluminum front and rear. We're lighter and we're considered more high performance. This bike also has a disc brake. I think they all did at that point. And I will tell you that it works like a modern disc brake. It's actually a very good disc brake. We had to put new shoes on there. And on this bike you couldn't buy the shoes. You had to take the old ones off, take the pads off the old ones, and then rivet the new brake pads onto the metal and then put it all back together. Now, when I grew up, that was just kind of the standard way of doing things, so I had no trouble with that. I also put a new rotor on it, and I wanted it just like the old one, no drilling, no slots. Actually, a very good brake. It's got these tube forks, and I'll tell you, it's like driving a spaghetti. It's a very loose front end as far as the shocks go. You know, it's very soft on the front end. Running here to the back, these are still the original shocks. So if I were to put new shocks on this and rebuild the front end, this bike would probably handle a little bit better, but I'm not going to go through all that trouble. I like having the original parts that came with the bikes. I don't want to tear into that unless I have to, and at some point I probably will, but at this point we're going to leave it the way it is. On the back it's got a big old drum brake. Check that out. And that is inside this little chain thing, and I just love the way that works. I love drum brakes. I grew up on drum brakes. There's an aluminum wheel. Isn't that just neat? Absolutely gorgeous. I love, this is the original seat to the motorcycle, original paint, original paint, fenders, everything. Just very lucky that way. And that goes back to the old Barry. He kept his stuff in really good shape and took care of it. So that's why we have all these original parts. I added the bags myself. The gas tank is 2 gallons. That's probably 8 liters, I think, or right around 8 liters. 2.2 gallons, I think. And the bike gets about 35 to 45 miles a gallon, depending on how hard you ride it. So when you put gas in this, as you're screwing the lid back on it, you better know where your next gas station is. If you don't, you're going to be running out of fuel. And to be honest, I carry a little bottle of fuel in here just in case. I have run out of gas one time. That's the only time this bike has ever left me stranded. And it was my fault. I ran out of gas. I switched to reserve. On reserve, you go about 8 miles and you run out. And I was about 3 miles from home and I ran out. So not a big issue there. This has what they call the buckhorn bars. The bike had one mirror on it. I found another one similar to it that I put on there. The reservoir for the brakes. Running kill switch right there. Starter button here. Right side blinker button over here. Of course, the accelerator. Jumping over to this side. High-low for the lights. Left side blinkers. And then the horn button right there. It's got these really hard rubber grips. The clutch right there. It all works pretty good. Every time I get this bike out, the first few miles, you gotta struggle to get used to how things work. But after that, once it gets into your system, it works very well. Mechanical tachometer, mechanical speedometer. Those are the original miles on the bike. I think when I got this, it had 17,500 on it. So that's what we put on the bike, whatever the difference is, about 3,500 miles. Oh, almost 4,000. And oil pressure light, generator light. I put 2 new lights in here because one quit working, and when I took it apart, I broke the other one. And anyway, it's just a really neat system, isn't it? We think Barry added these highway bars, and I'll be honest with you, you just can't use. You can use the left side one, but you can't use the right side one because even with the stock carburetor system on it, because of this, because of it's in the way. It's just in your way. It's a gorgeous motorcycle. It's really my pride and joy, and I feel very privileged to own it. As far as weight goes, it's hard to pin down a number. I've never weighed it myself, I've read 540, I've read 500, I've read 450, so I'm going to call it at about 500 pounds or about 230, 240 kilograms. So it's got an incredibly low center of gravity. I mean, this has the lowest center of gravity of virtually any motorcycle I've ever driven, which means it feels very light, you know. It's just not very heavy at all to move off the kickstand or to do anything with. I always make the joke that it's got the center of gravity of a skateboard, you know, everything's way down low, way down low. Pretty good ground clearance, not too bad, you know, not bad at all. I think the back tire is a Metzler, and someday I'm going to change that. It was brand new when I got the bike, and I'm trying to wear it out, but I'll get to that done. We put a Dunlop on the front that says Harley Davidson on it, so it says Harley, so it must be good, right? Kind of a tribute to Barry. He had these on there when we got the bike, so I left those on there also. It's a beautiful machine, and I just love riding it. So to ride this, to sit on it, it's very low. These are my Noru gloves. We'll throw those over there. It's very low. Just throw a leg over it, no trouble at all. Check that out. Very narrow, really. It looks, and it's wider at the bottom than it is at the top. It's a very mechanical, very metal type thing, you know. Here's the key on the side. I can tell you something about that switch, but I don't want to share it. It's just two wires, basically. So here's my lights are on. I've got it neutral. Let's see if we can get it to start. There it is. See that little shake in there? Everything shakes, rattles, and rolls. You can hear the air rushing into the carburetor when I turn the gas. It rattles down the road, or shakes. I shouldn't call it rattling. It shakes down the road. It's a, you know, they call it the Milwaukee vibrator, you know, so, and that's actually a truism, I would think. Just a gorgeous machine. Love this bike. Love this bike. You know what? I love it so much, I think I'm going to hop back on it and go for a motorcycle ride. It's a beautiful day. If it's nice where y'all are at, get yourselves out there and ride, my friends. Life is good. Wahoo! Yippee-yi-yay! Yippee-yi-yo! Down the road we go! Beautiful, beautiful machine.